Bucs fans, football is finally back. Now, it's in the preseason form, but it is back. And on this episode, I'm going to give you guys my key thoughts and takeaways from game number 1, the Titans versus Bucs preseason game. Also, the Buccaneers made a slight change to the logo on their helmet. It has a lot of fans furious. I don't like it myself. I'll explain that entire situation. Last week, the Buccaneers brought in Teddy Bridgewater, and they revealed, and he did himself too, that the Buccaneers have always loved him even since 2014 in the draft process. Lastly, the Buccaneers are going to hold a joint practice with the Pittsburgh Steelers real soon before their Week 2 matchup against the Steelers. I'll talk about all that and more on this episode of Fear the Bay. There are a few things more beautiful than NFL football being back on our television screens. And this weekend, we got blessed with Buccaneers football being on our television, which I think is even more beautiful than just regular NFL football. Now, it is preseason. I know a lot of people don't really care about the preseason much, but preseason football is still football. And these are guys, out there, you have second, third, fourth string guys who are fighting to make, this roster, fighting to live out their, dreams to be a professional NFL player in this league. And if they don't get on the practice squad or make the roster, a final 53-man roster, and they don't make somebody else's roster or practice squad, these guys may never get another opportunity to show what they can do in the NFL. They might have to go play in the Canadian Football League or in the UFL, something else, or choose a different career path. So these guys are out there fighting tooth and nail to make this roster or to put out good film for the other 31 teams in the league. So it's preseason football, okay? It's exhibition. It doesn't overall count for the record. But these guys are playing as hard as they possibly can because they want to live out their dream of playing in the NFL. Also, you want to see the depth that your team have. So for the Buccaneers, it's good to see if one of the starters goes out, who's playing behind him. It's good to see the Buccaneers and every team has that next man up mentality. But it's good to see footage in game scenarios of what these guys can do. Like for example, Baker Mayfield goes down. Now we see what Kyle Trask can do in a game. Now he has to continue that kind of performance, but it's really good for that also to see the depth that you have on offense, defense, and special teams on this roster. Before we get to the game where the Buccaneers won 29-7 against the Tennessee Titans in pretty dominant fashion, I want to get to the joint practice that these two teams held on August 7th. Just a few, quick things from there. So you had number 1 overall pick Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans come into Tampa. It wasn't a nighttime, practice like they had the nighttime game for week number 1 of the preseason. This was during the day. So it probably felt like this fireplace for all the players out there, especially for the Tennessee Titans players who haven't had a chance to practice in this Tampa August heat, which is, kind of like feels record breaking. But you had a few important things that happened in that practice. Hassan Reddick. So we know, first off, that Todd Bowles likes to drop his edge rushers into coverage. Sometimes we see defensive linemen drop back into coverage. Probably most notably Vita Vea a few years ago against the Green Bay Packers. He dropped back into coverage. Aaron Rodgers found Aaron Jones for a quick check down, and Vita Vea, who dropped back into coverage, just comes in, boom, and pops him and, forces a fumble on Aaron Jones. So that was real cool. But in this case, in the joint practice, he had Hassan Reddick. It was a third down scenario. He drops back into coverage. This would be on Cam Ward's left side. He drops back into coverage and catches the interception. So he was able to pick off the number 1 overall pick. Now, it's good to see that if those opportunities arise, Hassan Reddick, where the ball's around him, Hassan Reddick can come down with the football and can cause the turnover there. So we know he can produce sacks, but now we can see, he can catch that ball if the ball goes in his direction. That was a big thing. Also, you had a big fight that broke out. You had, I don't know exactly which players were involved who initiated the fight, but you had a huge fight break out between the Buccaneers and the Titans. The entire benches for both sides were completely on the field. Everybody, coaches, everybody was on the field. Even had Tristan Wirfs, who he's dealing with the knee injury, come out with his crutches, running onto the field. Afterwards, he was chirping the entire time against Tennessee Titans players, but And Baker Mayfield had a funny comment where he said Tristan Wirfs needs to keep his ass on the sideline and not come out onto the field, especially in a chaotic situation like that. But a lot of chaos. He had a lot of chaos on the field between the Buccaneers and the Tennessee Titans out there. It was really interesting to see the footage from that occurrence there. So we have the Hassan Reddick interception. We have the big fight. And the last point I want to bring up is the Mike Evans touchdown. So towards the end of practice, Mike Evans is working against the Tennessee Titans cornerbacks. He catches a nice pass in the back end of the end zone, scores a touchdown, and then he just runs off. He just leaves. He leaves the field. So he goes to the back and he just runs off into the locker room, and he's done. He calls it a day. A lot of fans were wondering, did he get hurt? I know a lot of people on the X were wondering, did he get hurt? Did something happen? No, he just ran off. He just had a walk-off TD to kind of close out practice, showing, that he's the dominant one. He's going to catch his touchdown, and he's going to call it a day for himself. He's done. He doesn't need to continue. He's done what he's done what he needs to do against this Tennessee Titans defense. He's shown what he needs to show. Real cool there with the walk-off touchdown. He comes out later on and signs autographs for Buccaneers fans. So that was really cool there. Now let's get to this game. All right, so this game, again, the Buccaneers dominated the Tennessee Titans. Now, this is a team, the Tennessee Titans, who had the first overall pick in the draft this year. So we know they're probably not going to be a playoff team that can surprise people and become a playoff team. I don't think that's going to happen this year, at least. But Kyle Trask, he had a phenomenal game out there. Went 12 for 16, 129 yards, no touchdowns, but he was accurate. He starts off the game by hitting Emeka Buka and Jalen McMillan on two 20-plus yard catches. I believe, Jalen McMillan had a 25-yard reception. Emeka Buka had a 21-yard reception. So right away, he had a lot of pressure in his face also. So that was another thing cool to see how he can perform when he has, pressure in his face by an opposing defense. The offensive line for the Buccaneers, they didn't have first-string guys in there. They had the second, third-string guys in there. But in the beginning, they were really struggling to pass protect. So they created later on really good run lanes, and really throughout the game, really good running lanes for the running backs. And that's why the running backs excelled. They ran for a total, they had 41 carries for 178 yards total and 2 touchdowns. But in the pass protection game, the Buccaneers offensive line really struggled early on. But Kyle Trask, he didn't let that get to him. He didn't let it rattle him. He was able to, even when I believe it was a Jalen McMillan pass, he's doing like a fadeaway pass. He's running he's on the back of his heel, throwing it up because he has pressure in his face. But Kyle Trask is a guy who I've been a bit down on because I got to see him 2 days in practice. He really didn't impress me. But it was even, I believe, Rick Stroud who asked Todd Bowles after the game, is it just that Kyle Trask is a gamer rather than a practice guy? So meaning, is it just that Kyle Trask performs better when he's in a game scenario rather than a practice scenario? And I believe Todd Bowles stated that he needs to see a bit more of Kyle Trask to see if this type of performance repeats itself before he can give like a conclusion, a definitive answer on that question. But I was really impressed with Kyle Trask. We know that the Buccaneers brought in Teddy Bridgewater to possibly compete for the quarterback 2 position with Kyle Trask. I'll talk more about the Teddy Bridgewater signing later on. That's an interesting one there. But if Kyle Trask continues to perform the way he did, I think he really has solidified himself as the true QB2 on this team. And we'll see what happens with Teddy Bridgewater as time progresses. All right, so in the running game, again, the Buccaneers, they had 41 carries. Josh Grizzard caught a very heavy run, a game here. They had they threw for a total 25 times. They had 25 pass attempts, and they had 41 rushing plays. So Owen Wright, he really surprised me. He was a guy, now he's working as second, third string guys, but he's a second, third string guy also, fourth string guy really in this team. But he had 18 carries for 87 yards and a touchdown, a rushing touchdown. Now he really kind of had like 3 touchdowns in total because 2 of those were brought back because of penalties. So he scores the first time, and there was a holding penalty on number 30, Jacob Harris, who the Buccaneers recently brought in. And Jacob Harris struggled a bit. I'll talk about him in a few minutes. But Owen Wright, he scores a touchdown, and it's called all the way back because of a holding penalty with Jacob Harris. Then later on in the game, he scores again, and then you have another holding penalty by O'Keefe, so that one's neglected also. He has to negate it also. He has to come all the way back. And then the third time, later on in the fourth quarter, he finds himself in the end zone again. And this time, no holding penalties. I'm sure after he scored, he looked around to see if there was a flag or anything. But this time it counted. Owen Wright finally got his rushing touchdown. So really impressed with what I saw from him. Now again, he's a guy who's likely like the RB4 on this team. I don't think the Buccaneers will hold 4 running backs on their roster. In my initial 53-man roster prediction, I had them just holding 3, Bucky Irving, Rachaad White, and Sean Tucker, but we do know there is an injury to Rachaad White. He has a groin issue, so he got hurt in the game. He had 6 carries for 28 yards, 4.7 yards per carry. His longest run was of 12 yards. He got hurt in the game, so we don't know exactly the severity of that injury. It's going to keep him out for an extended period of time. We don't know, but if the Buccaneers can't start off with Rachaad Wright, being healthy, Owen Wright, if he continues, playing like this, he's showing that he can get on the field and produce if you need him to. Another guy who can get on the field and produce if you need him to is Sean Tucker, who is the current RB3 on this team. Sean Tucker was really impressive out there. He had 13 carries for 50 yards, had a touchdown. His longest run was 23 yards, so really impressive there. The next day on Sunday after the game, Todd Bowles talked a bit to the media and he was asked about Sean Tucker, and he stated, this is from Todd Bowles, he said, "Sean brings us another explosive runner. He's got very good contact balance and he can break a lot of tackles and he can naturally find holes." So that was really important. So again, the Buccaneers offensive line kind of struggled against the pass protection early on. They fixed that for the most part later on in the game. But they were really good throughout the game in run blocking. So it was really good to see those lanes open up, and the running backs like Sean Tucker excel, see those lanes, have good vision, and take those lanes to produce good yardage rushing yardage for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Continuing his Todd Bowles' statement here, he says, "Every opportunity he's gotten, he's shown." So if you remember last year when the Buccaneers went up against the New Orleans Saints and Sean Tucker got a significant amount of the carries, Sean Tucker became the NFC Player of the Week. I believe that was week 5, week 6, somewhere around that range, but Sean Tucker performed very well. He's a guy who I'm sure Josh Grizzard, the offensive coordinator, and Todd Bowles, they want to see more of. They want to find a way to get him out there on the field more often. If they can find a nice role for him, I don't know exactly, because again, you have Bucky Irving, you have Rachaad White. I don't know what that role would look like, but if they can find a way to get him out there on the field, I think that can only produce good things, positive things for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and just continue to improve Sean Tucker's game. The more reps you get, the better you would get. You could regress, but the more reps a guy gets, like Sean Tucker, who doesn't really get reps throughout the regular season as much, the more reps he gets, maybe his game continues to improve. Maybe improves against pass protection, improves coming out backfield, catch the ball a bit more, having even better vision possibly. So I'm really impressed with what I saw from Sean Tucker. Hopefully it can continue. Bucs fans, want to know how you can help this channel, Fear the Bay, grow and expand? All you have to do is 3 simple things: like, subscribe, and comment. They're quick. They're simple things to do. They're free. And what it does is it helps boost out this content to more Buccaneers fans like yourself. So when YouTube sees you liking, subscribing, and engaging with the content, they boost this content out to more viewers like yourself. So please, if you can, like, subscribe, and comment. That helps me out a lot. And let's get back to the video. We don't want to miss that. No receiver for the Buccaneers had a bigger night than Ryan Miller. Ryan Miller played phenomenally. He had some very difficult catches and some clutch catches. He was targeted 7 times, had 6 receptions for 66 yards. No touchdowns, but he did have a 21-yard reception there. He's a guy who is fighting for a roster spot. This is a very stacked wide receiver room, even with Chris Godwin being out. But he's a guy who's fighting and competing tooth and nail to be on the Buccaneers roster, or to make the practice squad, or to make another team's 53-man roster. So again, these guys aren't just putting film out there for the Buccaneers; they're putting film out there for all the other 31 teams in the league. So Ryan Miller, last week I released my initial 53-man roster prediction. And I had the Buccaneers keeping 5 wide receivers, that being, in this scenario, Chris Godwin would be on the PUP list, so missing the first 4 games of the season. But I had as my 5 wide receivers, Mike Evans, Emeka Buka, Jalen McMillan, Tez Johnson, and Sterling Shepard. All those guys making the team. Now, I think Tez Johnson, he's injured right now, but I think he's a pretty safe bet to make this team. From what I've seen, he's very shifty, he's quick, he moves around, he plays special teams. I think he's going to be, once the season starts, the primary punt returner for this team. But you would really, if the Buccaneers keep 5 in that scenario and Chris Godwin starts off on the PUP list, Ryan Miller and Sterling Shepard, I can see those 2 guys competing for that final 5th wide receiver roster spot. Now, I like Sterling Shepard, but Ryan Miller, he impressed me last night. You have also another wide receiver who struggled quite a bit. So Ryan Miller did really good for himself last night. He improved his stock. He improved his standing with this team. And Jacob Harris, really diminished his standing with this team. So again, he had the holding penalty that negated the Owen Wright would-be rushing touchdown. And he also had a fumble. So he catches the ball, and the Tennessee Titan player comes behind him and knocks the ball out. So in one night, he had a fumble, and he also had the holding penalty. Now, the Buccaneers brought him in recently. He looks a bit weird out there as a wide receiver wearing number 30. He's 6'5". He played in the UFL. He's also played with the Los Angeles Rams, so he's been around quite a bit. But Jacob Harris, the Buccaneers brought him in recently, and he didn't improve his stock. He probably hurt his stock with this team. It was already going to be a rough road for him to make this team, a hard climb for him. And I think he just hurt himself. He shot himself in the foot tonight with those mental errors. On offense, just to finish out real quick, Elijah Klein, I know he had the botched snap between him and Kyle Trask, but he played really good out there. I think he really held his own. Greg Allman posted the snap count. So the Buccaneers had him starting off as the starting center for this game. Graham Barton, the first team offensive line, didn't play. But he was at center and then shifted over to guard once the undrafted free agent Jake Majors from Texas, a center, came in to play center. He played 59 plays for 84% of the game. So Elijah Klein was really out there for basically the majority, or if not the entire game, 84% of the plays. Elijah Klein is a guy who has a lot of versatility. So he's a little bit shorter than you would like your offensive tackles to be, but he can play offensive tackle, left or right. He can play guard, left guard or right guard. He can play center, as he showed last night, again, besides the botched snap between him and Kyle Trask. But all centers make mistakes at times, and he's a guy who doesn't play primarily center, so he doesn't snap 100% of the time and get all those reps there at center. But he's a guy who the Buccaneers like to move around. Even in that game alone, again, he started off as center, then he pushed him out to guard. So he's a guy who I would really like to see the Buccaneers continue to put out there throughout the preseason, have him play the majority of the game, hopefully he doesn't get hurt, but just give him as many reps as he possibly can. Watch him, see, move him around, see where does he perform best. And if you need to call him up, because somebody gets injured on the first team offensive line in the regular season, he's a guy who, I feel confident that he can go in there and fill his role and do what he can to make sure the Buccaneers continue to have success on offense in the pass and the run game. Ben Chikwama had a holding penalty there. He played 49 plays, 70% of the time. Michael Jordan, the guard, he had 44 plays, 63% of the time he was out there. So those were the offensive linemen. Again, the offensive line started off, bad in the pass protection game, improved, but created throughout the entire game really good running lanes for the running backs on this team. Let's get to the defense real quick. So Todd Bowles has this entire offseason explained that he wants ball hawks on this team. And just in week number 1 of the preseason, the Buccaneers were able to create 3 turnovers via interception. So you had Nick Jackson. So Nick Jackson is a guy, he's from undrafted free agent from Iowa. Nick Jackson is a guy who, I haven't watched much on. I didn't really, when I was out there in training camp, didn't keep an eye on him. I was keeping an eye on other players. But Nick Jackson really impressed me tonight. He's probably one of the players on defense that impressed me the most. Nick Jackson, he had a sack, and then he also recorded a one-handed interception. So I believe it was Tim Boyle. Tim Boyle threw the ball, or it might have been Brandon Allen, but the quarterback for the Titans threw the ball. It gets tipped by a defensive lineman, and then just Nick Jackson's able to one-handed, grab it in the air and come down with the interception. Really impressive play there. Very good athleticism, good hand-eye coordination from the undrafted free agent rookie. Now, I have the Buccaneers keeping 4 linebackers, but Nick Jackson, Saturday night, he improved his standing with this team. He improved his stock. So he's a guy that you should keep an eye out for. We don't know what's going on with the Anthony Walker Jr. injury. Will he be, ready for the regular season? Will he be able to come in at the end of the preseason? We don't know yet. But the Buccaneers, they keep 4 as I predict, and Anthony Walker Jr. isn't ready to play once the season comes around. Nick Jackson is a guy who I can see filling in for the Buccaneers as the 4th inside linebacker for this team. J.J. Roberts, he didn't have a big play, didn't cause an interception or a fumble, but he actually did. I believe it was J.J. Roberts. I believe he caused the Tyreek Thunderbird interception. So I believe he played tight coverage and deflected the pass, and the ball, flew in the air, and Tyreek Thunderbird was able to come down with the interception. So J.J. Roberts, he played the most snaps on defense. The Buccaneers really like him throughout training camp. He's been the second team nickel corner. He plays safety, but the Buccaneers really like him. Todd Bowles has explained before, he can run like a safety, he run like a corner, but hit you like a safety. So he's really athletic. They really like him. They had him out there for 42 plays, most plays on defense he took out of any other Buccaneers player, and he played for 74% of the game. So he had the most snaps on defense for this team. Chris Braswell, okay, so, before we get to Chris Braswell, Shiloh Sanders. Shiloh Sanders had a very close sack. He came off the edge. He was blitzing in and had a very close sack. The quarterback was able to get it out before the sack could occur, but he brought some good pressure there. Didn't cause, he didn't record a sack or an interception, but real good at quarterback pressure there. Chris Braswell. So Chris Braswell didn't impress me at all. The Buccaneers are going to count on him a lot this year. David Walker, the 4th round selection for the Buccaneers this year from Central Arkansas. We know he went down in day number 3 with a torn ACL. He's going to be out for the entire season. That's, rough for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, Buccaneers were going to count on him a lot, rely on him a lot. He's a guy who knows how to get to the quarterback throughout his entire career at Central Arkansas. He's a guy who can find the quarterback, get to the quarterback, and create production, create sack production. But Chris Braswell was out there for a good amount of the plays. Let's see exactly how many plays he was out there for. All right, so Chris Braswell was out there for 31 defensive plays. That is 54% of the game. And he's working against, keep in mind, he's working against 2nd, 3rd, possibly 4th string offensive linemen for the Tennessee Titans. And he didn't impress at all. He didn't get to the quarterback as you would expect him to in his second year. Again, he was a 2nd round draft pick last year from Alabama. He recorded 1.5 sacks last year, didn't really produce anything for the Buccaneers. Now, you want to see him take that next step forward. I know Todd Bowles was explaining this year, Chris Braswell is a bit, he's a bit slimmer. He's a bit faster because of cutting down weight a little bit. He understands the bulk of this defense. He understands the defense better, so he's playing quicker, not having to think as much. But he's working against the 2nd, 3rd, 4th string Titans offensive lineman, and he can't record a sack. He can't, cause significant pressure on the quarterback. So he was a guy who I was really disappointed with on defense. Hopefully that changes, and we see, him have more production. Maybe he just, things, they're not really scheming also, so the Buccaneers aren't scheming against the Tennessee Titans as much as they would do for a regular preseason game. So maybe, they would scheme something up to get him a bit open more. But again, he's working against the 2nd, 3rd, 4th string offensive lineman and wasn't able to produce a sack or create enough pressure where I feel comfortable with him, if Hassan Reddick or Yaya Diaby go down with an injury for him to fill in. I'll feel right now more comfortable with Anthony Nelson coming in and filling in it for one of those two guys, the starters, getting injured. On defense, real quick on special teams to close this out. I think the Buccaneers have found their punter. I've said this before. I think the Buccaneers have found their punter for the long term with Riley Dixon. Riley Dixon has a strong, big leg out there. I was really impressed with him. Actually, before we close out, we get to the 3 headlines, let me talk about Jacob Parrish real quick. So Jacob Parrish The Buccaneers had him move around a little bit, was playing some outside corner also. For the most part, he was impressive besides the plays where he went up against Calvin Ridley, and Calvin Ridley, really, found his way open and working against the rookie Jacob Parrish. But Jacob Parrish was playing really tight coverage. I know he had a PBU that when the cameras went over to Todd Bowles was grinning, so widely, so big there, because the Buccaneers believe in Jacob Parrish pretty much since day number one of really early on in the training camp. He's been the starting nickel for this team. The Buccaneers really like him. Yeah, Benjamin Morrison is splitting some first team reps with Jamel Dean, competing with him. But Jacob Parrish has really found his spot as the starting nickel for this team. JJ Roberts working as a second nickel. So Jacob Parrish, besides the plays going up against Calvin Ridley, which, they give him really good experience going up against a wide receiver that caliber, he played really well for himself. All right. So let's get to our three headlines now. Last week, the Buccaneers brought in and signed veteran quarterback Teddy Bridgewater. Now, I really like this move, and the Buccaneers have always liked Teddy Bridgewater since 2014, since the pre-draft, whole experience there. I'll explain that in a minute. But Teddy Bridgewater is a guy who brings a wealth of knowledge and experience and leadership into his quarterback room behind Baker Mayfield, something that was truly lacking in this quarterback room. The Buccaneers have behind Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask, they have Connor Bazelak, they have Michael Pratt, who's injured right now. Michael Pratt is. But they don't have any guys with true game experience. If Baker Mayfield went down, you're hoping that Kyle Trask can play like he did in week 1 of the preseason, but you don't truly know when he's going to go up against, first team players and that second and third team defensive players. But Teddy Bridgewater has been a guy who's bounced around a bit. He was, in 2014, he was drafted by the Minnesota Vikings as the 32nd overall selection. So he was the final pick in the first round there. Coming out of Louisville, he plays with the Minnesota Vikings for 3 years, then goes on to the New Orleans Saints, was traded to the Saints, then plays with the Panthers in 2020, then goes to the Broncos, Miami Dolphins, and then to the Detroit Lions. After his stint with the Detroit Lions, he decided to retire from the league, go down to his hometown Miami and become the high school football coach, the head coach for his old high school. He leads those kids all the way to a championship there. He ends up getting suspended for there's some unfair advantage, that the district is saying because he was paying for players, Uber rides, those types of things allegedly, and he was, paying for their food. Financially, since he had, the wealth, he was giving the kids as a district stall, an unfair advantage over other teams and other high schools. But now the Buccaneers brought him in. They've always liked him, as I said, since the pre-draft visit. This is something that Teddy Bridgewater and general manager Jason Light, when they got a chance to talk to media, that they truly hinted at and they talked about. You think about Jason Light, 2014, that's his first year as general manager of the Buccaneers. His first round overall selection was Mike Evans, who undoubtedly will be a first ballot Hall of Famer once he decides to retire in 5 years he gets in. But his second overall, selection, the second round pick was Austin Seferian-Jenkins. He was selected with the 38th overall pick. He was a tight end out of Washington. He didn't work out. If you remember, he actually had a DUI with the Buccaneers while he was playing here. Then he goes and plays on with the Jacksonville Jaguars and I believe possibly with the Patriots. But ultimately, he turned out to be a bust, all right, a draft bust for the Buccaneers. Now, Jason Light hinted that if Teddy Bridgewater would have fallen a bit more, again, he was the 32nd overall pick. He was the first final pick in the first round. But if he would have fallen a bit more down into the second round, the Buccaneers likely would have drafted him over Austin Seferian-Jenkins with that second round pick. So you would have had, as your first round pick for Jason Light's very first year, you would have had Mike Evans as your first round pick and Teddy Bridgewater as your second round pick. Now, would it have worked? That 2014 team goes on for the Buccaneers. They had Josh McCown, they had Mike Lennon. They go on to have the number 1 overall selection that year, and the Buccaneers draft Jameis Winston in 2015. But it's very interesting to hear that Teddy Bridgewater would have been the second round selection for the Buccaneers if he was available to them. Also, we skip forward, about 6 years, 2020. Jameis Winston's coming off his 30 for 30 season, insane numbers. He produced, with 30 plus interceptions. He also had, with touchdowns. He also had those 30 interceptions. So the full 30 for 30 experience. That was Jameis Winston's final year in Tampa Bay. But if you remember, Bruce Arians was the head coach at the time. Jason Light, obviously still the general manager at the time also. He still is. But they were hinting in the offseason that they're going to look who's behind door number 2. If you remember the door number 2 whole talk, door number 2. So we learned now that Teddy Bridgewater was also one of those men behind door number 2. The Buccaneers are ready to move on from Jameis Winston. He didn't have a contract moving forward, and they wanted to see who else is out there. So the Buccaneers, of course, end up going with the ultimate man behind door number 2, Tom Brady. He leads them to a championship, a Super Bowl, second Super Bowl in franchise history, and Super Bowl 55 in that 2020 season. But if Tom Brady decided not to sign with the Buccaneers were really heavy and really interested in signing Teddy Bridgewater. And what would that have looked like if he signed instead of Tom Brady? So, did the Buccaneers still win a Super Bowl? I don't think so. But I think they would have been a playoff contender still with Teddy Bridgewater as the quarterback. But I don't think they reached the Super Bowl with Teddy Bridgewater as the quarterback. But real interesting thing there, he would have been the pick if he was still available in the second round. He would have been the guy in 2020 to come in after Jameis Winston if Tom Brady didn't sign. So, real interesting. The Buccaneers have always liked him. They finally get him now. This is his post-retirement, kind of his pseudo post-retirement, but the Buccaneers finally get a chance to work with quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, a guy who they want to work with for 11 years now at this point. So what does this mean for Kyle Trask and the other quarterbacks on this team? Does Teddy Bridgewater coming in, does that, he wins automatically, he earns automatically a starting role, not starting role, but a position on this 53-man roster? And I don't know if he truly does. The Buccaneers, besides when Tom Brady was here, when they kept 3 quarterbacks because they had Tom Brady, Blaine Gabbert, and Kyle Trask, the Buccaneers have kept 2 quarterbacks over the past few seasons with Baker Mayfield on the roster. I don't envision them keeping 3 quarterbacks. Now they could, but if you keep 3 quarterbacks, you have to keep, limit your, have one less guy at another position. Maybe, you have 3 tight ends instead of 4 tight ends or something like that, So I don't really envision them keeping 3 quarterbacks. I envision them keeping 2 quarterbacks and possibly Teddy Bridgewater as a guy who gets placed on the practice squad. And if something happens to Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask, he's a guy who can step in and be on the 53-man roster. He's, like he said before, he's really close to Miami, so he could still connect with the high school players. And he talked about his high school football kids, driving up after, they play their games on Friday. They can drive up on Sunday and see their coach out there on the field or on the sidelines, with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Since Miami and Tampa, that's about a 4-hour drive there. But again, it's a really interesting signing. I like this move. I think, maybe part of Kyle Trask's phenomenal play against the Tennessee Titans was because he has a fire underneath him. He has a fire underneath him, and it's lighting him up, and he wants to compete more, and be the best version of Kyle Trask that we have seen so far. So hopefully this continues to motivate Kyle Trask, and he continues to perform at a high level, and he solidifies his spot as a true QB2 on this team. But if he can't perform at the level the Buccaneers want him to, they have veteran quarterback Teddy Bridgewater who can perform at the level that they want him to. Let's go on to our next headline now. So while you were watching the Buccaneers versus Titans game and you saw something a bit off with the helmet decal for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you were not just seeing things. You don't have to adjust your TV screen or anything. There was something a bit off with that, and I know a lot of people were furious. I myself didn't like what the changes were with the helmet. So what happened was the decal on the side. So the Buccaneers have a flag decal. What happened was they minimized the size. They shrunk the size of the flag, so this flag was a lot smaller than what it normally is. Now with the alarm clock, if you remember the alarm clock uniforms, the flag was enormously big, a bit too big. But what happened was they took the normal base helmet and they shrunk the decal. We do get clarification on it, and will that change be full-time or not? But there's a few people in the Tampa Bay area, a lot of fans were furious once they saw these helmets, if you look in the comments. But Luke Easterling and Sam Lee were 2 of the biggest names to voice their disinterest and their dissatisfaction in these helmets and the decal change. You also have NFL Fashion Advice, big uniform and helmet guy, come out and speak out against this change also. I think the Buccaneers, with their base normal helmet, they have one of the best helmets in the league. I think the only other team that you could say has a better helmet than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would be the Minnesota Vikings. So I really like their look and their uniform and their helmet. The Minnesota Vikings have the horn, and it's like this matte purple. It's really nice. But again, what's going on with this Buccaneers logo problem? Is it going to get fixed? What's going on? Well, Greg Auman, if you're not following Greg Auman on X, you should. He's one of the best Buccaneers reporters that there is out there. Him, Rick Stroud, Pew Report, Jenna Lane, those are the top people out there, Rock Riley. But Greg Auman, he provided a lot of clarification for Bucs fans. He says, lots of you asking about smaller logos on Bucs helmets tonight. I'm told there were a 1-game trial and players will be wearing the regular ones, the regular helmets next week. So there we go. We get full clarification on what was going on there. They're just trying to look out for 1 game. So it looked a bit off. It looked a bit weird. I hope they don't go back to this look at all ever. Now the logo is more in line. The size of the logo is more in line with the Buccaneers 2000s, 2000s uniforms that they would wear, where the Buccaneers logo was a bit smaller, about the same size as it is now. Maybe being the Buccaneers are in their 50th year, they want to see, should we shrink the size to be more in line with the 2000s Buccaneers uniforms? But I hope they don't. I hope they keep the Buccaneers helmet the exact same as it is. Again, for me, it's one of the top 2 with that, the Buccaneers and the Minnesota Vikings helmet. I think it's a really, really nice look. Now, we do get the clarification again that these were just a 1-game trial. Next week, when the Buccaneers go up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're going to be in their normal helmet. So, if you're really stressing out about the look of these helmets, breathe easy. Everything is going to be okay. The Buccaneers are going to return to normalcy next week when they face the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now let's get to our next headline. This Saturday, there is more Buccaneers football to come. The Buccaneers will go up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 2 of the preseason. This time, it's not a home game. It's going to be an away game. The Buccaneers will play in Pittsburgh for that game on August 16th. But before the August 16th game on Saturday, the Buccaneers will go up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in a joint practice. So the Buccaneers really like these joint practices. Again, they just came off that Tennessee Titans joint practice last week. But they like these joint practices. This is something that's becoming more popular around the league because of the fact that you have a controlled environment. So in a real game, you can't control what's going on. You can't put players in certain situations like 2-minute or whatever. Those things just come naturally. In a scrimmage like this, in a joint practice, you guys, the 2 teams can work together and, really plan out how they want to, what position, what situations they want to see their players in, and really just get good work against an opposing team in a controlled environment. It limits injuries, limits all those types of things. So how many starters for the Buccaneers will we see in the second week of the preseason against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Saturday? I don't know. I don't think many of the Buccaneers starters will be out there just because of the fact that you can see what you want to see in these joint practices. So I think it will be kind of similar to what we saw in week number 1, where the majority of the starters or all the starters are not playing. If there are some starters out there, like, for example, Savasi Dennis was out there against the Tennessee Titans for some time. It's just because the Buccaneers want to see them a bit more, get them, good game reps, real game, live situations. I think this joint practice with the Pittsburgh Steelers is going to be more beneficial to the Buccaneers than the Tennessee Titans one was last week. Now, the Titans, again, they're a team who had the first overall selection in the draft, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are a team that's loading up, and they're trying to make a deep playoff run. If you paid attention throughout the offseason or some of the acquisitions that the Steelers have made, of course, the biggest one being they brought in, or at this point, is it the biggest? They brought in Aaron Rodgers to lead this quarterback room. So, they moved on from Justin Fields, moved on from Russell Wilson. They did re-sign Mason Rudolph. They brought in the draft Will Howard, former Ohio State quarterback, former quarterback for Emeka Egbuka. They brought him in. So that room is pretty solid there. It has more depth than the Tennessee Titans room did have past Cam Ward. But the Steelers bring in Aaron Rodgers. They traded for Jalen Ramsey and Geno Smith, tight end from Miami. So they trade Minkah Fitzpatrick, but they get Jalen Ramsey, and they get Geno Smith in return. I believe there was a late round pick in with that also. They also brought in Darius Slay in the offseason also. So they're loading up DK Metcalf from the Seattle Seahawks. He's fast, he's big, just like Mike Evans. Overall, the Steelers have brought in players that they think are going to help them push for that deep playoff run. They also extended TJ Watt. Remember, there's a potential holdout situation there. They extend him, give him a massive contract, give him the payday he was looking for. But I think this joint practice is going to be much more beneficial for the Buccaneers. You're going to go up against even better players. So Jacob Parrish, think about the defensive backs, the rookie, the young player defensive backs. They're going to go up against DK Metcalf. Benjamin Morrison gets to go one-on-one with DK Metcalf. Now, they go up against a big body receiver in Mike Evans, but there's different types of big body receivers, just like there's different types of smaller wide receivers. Aaron Rodgers, this defense, he's very smart. The Buccaneers went up against Aaron Rodgers in a joint practice when he first got to New York. And Zach Wilson was his backup quarterback. Remember, he gets injured in the very first game for the Jets in the regular season, so he wasn't able to play the first season, was able to play the second season, didn't go well. They fire Robert Saleh pretty early on. Now, Aaron Glenn from the Detroit Lions, former defense coordinator there, is the New York Jets head coach. The Buccaneers will see the New York Jets in week 3 of the regular season. That'll be the home opener for the Buccaneers. But overall, I think this will be really, really good for the Buccaneers. I'm excited to see, just hear reports, because again, no fans gonna be out there, just media. So hear reports of what's going on. Soak in whatever limited footage that we're allowed to see from there. But again, I think that this second preseason game, you're not going to see many starters, and the reason is, of course, because they're holding this joint practice in a controlled environment. But again, we'll get to see those second, third, fourth string guys out there, those guys who are clawing and fighting to make their spot on this roster, or make a spot on the practice squad, or in any other 31 teams. There's 31 other teams out there. They're trying to make their roster also, or their practice squad also. So these guys, they're out there fighting tooth and nail. Guys like Nick Jackson, who we talked about. You got Roman Parodi out there fighting extremely hard. You have Owen Wright, the running back, fighting extremely hard out there to kind of make this practice squad, or find a way, slip on this team, find a way on this team. So practice, preseason, it's preseason football, but again, it is very important football. Bucs fans, thank you guys for watching this episode. Please like, please subscribe. All those things really help us out. I truly appreciate all your support so far. We've gained a lot of subscribers recently, and we're trying to push now to 500 subscribers. So let's make that next push. If you watched this episode and you really liked it, please click that subscribe button. It's free, it's quick. Also, please share. So if you know any other Bucs fans, share this content to them. You can just click on YouTube, you can click share, and it will give you a link. You can send it through text or Instagram or X, however you want to share it. But if you know other Bucs fans out there, please share this content with them. It just helps the channel grow. More Bucs fans get to experience this content. Our reach gets bigger. It's just, it's a very cool experience making this content out there. And I'm just excited that we have a lot of people watching now, and that you guys really enjoy the content that is being made. And I just want to continue to grow and expand this channel as much as we possibly can. So let's push for 500 subscribers. If you've subscribed already and you've liked already, I truly appreciate you guys. Again, you guys are the heartbeat of Fear the Bay. You guys make this all possible with your support. I truly appreciate you guys. Thank you guys again for watching, and I'm your host, Dana Morales, signing out. Bye-bye.